past. Bereft of resources or markets at home, Japan ventured out from its home islands in search of both. In doing so, built an imperial commercial empire stretching along all of the East Asian archipelagos and continental coastline all the way to Myanmar. The Japan of today is not the aggressive empire of World War II, or even the economically dynamic Japan of the 1980s. Japan today seems a listless, spent force. Demographically, it is the world's oldest and fastest aging society, and the ranks of its younger population are now so thin that a return to the heady era now past is simply unthinkable. Japan's role in global export markets has shrunk to 1/3 of its peak. Between high taxes and an aged demography, industry has steadily relocated out of Japan. Toyota, Honda, and the like now do their best work at facilities close to market, particularly in the United States, and simply ship the profits home to help service an ever more decrepit population. It may not be a cheery model, but in a world of free trade, it is one that allows an ever-failing Japan to live out most of the rest of its national life in relative comfort. Which means that when the free trade era ends, this approach to life is completely and utterly screwed. More than most people's, the Japanese will have some very rapid-fire decisions to make. But there is reason for optimism. Yes, their best industry is located out of country, and that earns key income. But income isn't the same as food or energy. It can be replaced or, in a pinch, lived without. In the post-Bretton Woods world, the ongoing functionality of these facilities will be up to bilateral relations, with a very heavy eye towards supply chain feasibility. In most cases, the Japanese will bow towards inevitability and allow formal ownership to be sold at discounts to entities in the host countries. The key point is that these export markets are not actually employing Japanese citizens, so Japan's social structure would not be overly stressed by their loss. Yes, Japan's remaining home-located industry is utterly dependent upon imported raw materials, but this too is not as bad as it seems. The offshoring of its export industries means that what remains of them at home is actually quite small, only about 15% of GDP. And Japan's refuse reclamation system is among the world's most efficient, with more than half of their residential and industrial trash being recycled, lowering their materials needs still further. Japan would certainly prefer to remain internationally engaged in the Bretton Woods system, but it really doesn't need access to markets or even raw materials to the same degree it used to. All this isn't to say that Japan won't need to be aggressive, very aggressive, at seizing what it needs. It just means that it can be a bit choosier about targets and tactics. The Japanese certainly won't need to go all bonsai in the entire Pacific, just very specific parts of it. They have flexibility now that they didn't have in the early decades of the 20th century. Far and away, Japan's biggest concerns will be oil, natural gas, and food. And those specific needs will shape the nature and reach of Japan's actions. It imports less than 10% of its rice needs, but nearly 90% of its wheat and all of its corn. All told, Japan imports nearly 3/4 of its basic cereals. Japan's oil and natural gas needs are even worse. Factoring out the 500,000 BPD of refined products that it exports, and the 500,000 BPD of demand that will vanish by 2020 due to demographic aging, Japan will still need nearly 4 million BPD of oil to maintain its current system. It will also need at least 10 billion cubic feet of natural gas imports per day to keep the lights on. And even that figure assumes that the Japanese escape their post-Fukushima shell shock and restart their nuclear electricity system in a very big way. In meeting its needs, Japan will become a textbook case of finding the right tools, diplomatic, economic, and military, for the right job. North America will emerge as the world's most reliable source of foodstuffs and energy products, forcing Japan to seek as excellent relations as possible with the Americans. Some Japanese nationalists may call for a direct military approach, but only the inane will have forgotten the lessons of 1945, or that the Americans' military position in the Pacific would dictate a replay of the Japanese defeat in World War II in a matter of weeks. Japan simply purchasing what they need would actually put US naval power in the indirect service of Japanese needs, a far more pleasant arrangement. This isn't a one-stop shop, however. North America can easily meet Japan's caloric needs, but not necessarily its rice needs. Additionally, North America may be able to spare Japan 1 million BPD of crude oil and fuels, maybe even 2 million, but not 4 million. The Americans may also be able to share a few billion cubic feet a day of natural gas via LNG, liquefied natural gas, exports, but not 10 billion. Cutting a deal with the Americans is a good first step, a required one even, but it is no panacea. Unfortunately, Japan's other current energy suppliers, Australia and the Persian Gulf, will disappear as options, either having been already spoken for, too far away, or both, which will exhaust the nice side of Japan. The first military target is likely to be Russia's Sakhalin Island. It is just off the coast of Japan's northernmost Hokkaido island, putting it well within Japan's naval and air force power projection range. Its infrastructure was largely built by Japanese firms. That infrastructure terminates on the island's southern tip. The Japanese have the technical skill to keep all of Sakhalin's offshore energy production running. The Russians do not, and Japanese nationalists still fume that the Russians seized it from Japan in the wars of the first half of the 20th century. Securing Sakhalin would place just under 300,000 BPD of crude production and 3 BCFD, billion cubic feet per day, of natural gas production into Japan's output column. Seizing Sakhalin will also permanently sever any chance of having positive relations with Moscow. But, to be blunt, Moscow is 5,000 miles away, so the consequences of breaking that relationship aren't very high. Cooperation with Moscow could never really be part of the Japanese solution, since the Russians don't have the labor or capital to contribute to developing their far eastern territories. Besides, Japan and Russia never actually signed an armistice after the end of World War II. Technically, they are already at war. The second target will be Chinese Manchuria. Manchuria isn't known for its rice fields. The region's cold winters dictate the use of greenhouses to prepare spring plantings, but it has enough to satisfy Japan's needs. Just as importantly, the Daking area's oil complex produces over 1 million BPD of crude. While that volume is likely to halve over the next decade, that gives Japan years to find new supplies elsewhere and/or slim down its consumption profile.